and welcome back to my channel. In this and upcoming episodes we're going to be covering pivot tables, which in my opinion are the most important tools Excel has to offer in terms of analysis. I'm going to start with real basics and then move on to some features that are very well hidden, however very useful for an average user, which in the end should allow us to build a much more powerful dashboard than the previous one. So without further delay, let's get started. To demonstrate the idea, I've chosen this simple table containing average temperatures for a given city in a given country. After we're done processing the data, we should get 4 columns, which is exactly 4 main areas of the pivot table. So let's get started. You can see the address here, however, if you do a simple Google search or a list of cities by average temperature, you should get to the same point in Wikipedia. I've already copied this address to my clipboard, so if I go back to Excel, and then under the data tab go to get data from other sources and click web. I can now paste it into dialog box. If I right click here and say paste, click OK to that. Excel will give me a list of tables it thinks I'm interested in. So let's quickly have a look of how the data is structured. If I come back to my Edge Explorer and scroll down, as you can see, the first table contains countries and cities in Africa. Then the second one, Asia, Europe, and so on. If I show you that in Excel, this is exactly what we get to choose from. Most likely my pronunciation will be best with North American and European countries, so I'll select those two. In order to do that, I need to tick the select multiple items tick box and go to Europe and North America. I'm going to be doing some changes, so I'll click on transform data instead of load directly. Let's make the query editor a little bigger, and now let's do a little bit of cleanup. So first of all, I want to have the names of my queries shorter so I can easily identify them. If I go all the way to the right, I can see that this one is for the Europe, and I can also see that the Fahrenheit degrees are represented in brackets. This will be important for the next step. Let me select the entire text here, and I'll just change it to Europe. Going to do exactly the same for the other one, and call it North America. The next step will be to get rid of all the columns I don't need, and for this exercise I don't need the individual month columns. So I've selected January. If I go all the way to the right until December, and holding Shift key, I'm going to click on December header, and if I right click now, I have an option to remove the columns. I can also get rid of the reference column as we're not going to use it. The small problem with the data we have here is that this is not really a number. There is a number and then a number in a bracket, which Excel will not recognize as a number. So let's try to fix it. I don't need Fahrenheit degrees, so I'll just get rid of them overall. And the easiest way I can think of doing that is by going to split column by delimiter and then choosing custom delimiter being the opening bracket. And I can say that I want to do it for the rightmost delimiter and click OK to that. What this does is it separates this column into 2 columns wherever it can find the opening bracket. I'm not going to need this column, so I'll right click on that and remove it. Currently it's very easy to tell which one is which continent. However, I'm going to be merging the 2 tables together, so I need a column that will actually tell me which continent I'm looking at. The easiest way to do it is to simply add a new column. So if I go to add column and then custom column and calling it continent, with this being simple North America in quotation marks. If I click OK to that, it's just going to generate a column that has North America all across, and maybe just to make it look a little bit better, I'll change the name of this column to year instead of year.1. Now let's apply the same steps to the European table. So if I go to Europe and then select January, go all the way to December. If I now hold Shift key and select December, once again Excel will select all columns in between. However, now if I hold Control and select reference, I can delete all of them in one go, saving a little bit of time. The next step, of course, will be to get rid of the Fahrenheit degrees. So let's go ahead and do that. I can go to split column, then say by delimiter, and go to custom, opening bracket, and saying I want the rightmost delimiter. If I click OK to that, as you can see, I once again get an extra column which we're not going to need, so I'll right click and remove it. And as last two steps, I'm going to change this to year to match the other one, and I'm going to add one more custom column, which I will once again call continent, and in quotation marks Europe. So now we have two identical tables matching the structure, however not being presented as one just yet. To bring the two tables together, I can use the simple Power Query functionality. If I go to Home and then under Append, I'm going to append as queries as new. I could choose the first one, but in this way we would practically lose Europe if we ever need to do any changes there. So I'm just going to append queries as new, as we don't have a very big data set. Click on that. Excel is going to ask me if I'm only joining two or more tables. In our case, this is just two tables. And if so, which one they are. My first table can be Europe. The only other one I can select is North America. So if I click OK to that, very shortly we're getting a third table by default called Append 1 that has both Europe and North America. And this is where the continent column comes handy. Let me quickly change the name to merged and add one more step to ensure we can use it in a pivot. In order to show you the full functionality of a pivot table, I'm going to need at least one column that contains the numbers. Looking first glance, this column does fit the purpose. However, if you look at the data type, at the moment it's set to any. Let me show you what happens if I try to change it to decimal number. It still does seem okay, however if I scroll down, you will see some errors coming up here and there. I'm very happy that it happened, and this is the whole reason why I'm trying to use live data, so we can explore this kind of errors together. Let me demonstrate what happened on the example of row 68. When I change it to decimal places, Excel recorded this step, so I can go back by deleting it from my steps view. If I now go back to row 68, as you can see, this cell contains negative value. The problem, however, is within the minus. So if you look up, Europe seems to be doing a good job. The problem starts in North America, so let's try to fix it at the source. I'm going to go back to North America table and select the entire year. Let's quickly go back to Wikipedia and try to find a negative value. We know it does exist within the North American continent, so I'm just going to copy this one. See, if I copy this value and paste it to Notepad, which by the way is a great tool to look at values only, and then below type in minus, you can see that the character before 10 is slightly different than the minus. I'm going to highlight this character, right click on it and copy. Let's go back to Excel now and then go to transform. With the entire year column selected, we can say replace values. And the value we're looking for we can simply paste, so either Ctrl V or right click and paste. And we're going to replace it with just type in minus. If I click OK to that, and then go back to our merge table, I can try to change this to decimal once again. And if I scroll down, you will see that we don't get errors, we simply have values, and the column type is decimal number. That's all the formatting I needed, so I can go to Home, Close and Load. Excel now created a table for each of the tables we have in the Power Query, and you can see them in following tabs. So this one will be for the Europe, this one for the North America, and this one for our merged one. So if I scroll down, we have the both continents together. I'm gonna rename this to merged, just to make sure we're using the correct one. I can close this for now. As you can see, Excel automatically creates a table, which is great news because I can use that table directly to create pivot table. The easiest way to insert pivot table would be to go to Insert and then Pivot Table, or I can use keyboard shortcuts Alt, N, and V. That should bring me a dialog that will ask me a couple of questions. Question number one will be, what range do I want to use for the pivot? In my case, Excel automatically selects the merged table, which is great news because whenever the size of this table changes, I'm sure that all of it will be included in the pivot table. If it was a static range, for example here, as you can see, it doesn't move. So if next month there are more rows than what we can see at the moment, it's not going to automatically update. So I'm going to once again select the entire table to make sure that we get all the rows we need. And for the second argument, I'm just going to say paste it in the new worksheet for now. Click OK to that. And now we're ready to start exploring the powerful capabilities of the pivot table. At the moment our pivot table is empty, however we can see the space holder here, and we can also see our pivot table fields options here. Let's explore what each of those fields mean. Let's start with the rows. If I drag the continent to rows, you can see that I have them listed underneath each other. In a similar way, if I move it from rows to columns, I can see them listed in columns with grand total being added automatically. Let's move it back to rows. Now, one important thing that happens here is that if you look at the table, we have the continent repeating each other many times. What pivot table does is by default extracts only the unique values for a given column. Now let's drag year to values. And you will notice that by default, Excel will sum all the average temperatures for Europe and then sum all the average temperatures for North America. If I wanted to do it myself, I could go to the merge table, filter on Europe, and then if I sum all those values together, I just press Ctrl Shift down, you can see that the sum is 612.1, which is exactly what pivot table is showing us. It did exactly the same thing for North America, and we could use it to summarize values for the city. So if I get rid of continent, I can either just click on it and drag it anywhere or drag it back here. So if I drag country to rows, and then let's say Albania, if I go back to merged and try to search for Albania, you can see that it is indeed 15.2. If for whatever reason I wanted it to be layout differently, I could move country from rows to columns, and in this way I would achieve horizontal view. It doesn't look very good in this instance, so I'll keep the countries as rows. What does the filter do then? If I drag continent into filter, it allows me to filter the results I have in my rows. As you can see at the moment, the table is showing the mixture of cities both in North America and in Europe. If I change the filter to Europe now, I can only see European cities. I can do the same for America. If I wanted to, I could present both continent and country together, and in order to do that I can move continent from filter all the way up to rows and place it above a country. If I do that, as you can see, you have the entire Europe, which if I click on minus is going to be collapsed. Click on that again to expand. And then if I scroll down, I have North America. If you look closely, you can see that the cities for Europe will be listed under Europe and cities for America will be listed under North America. To finish off this part, let's populate all the filled areas here. I'm going to move continent under columns, and then I'm going to move country under filters. The last thing, I'm going to drag city into rows area. It's going to start making much more sense in my future videos, however, just to quickly walk through what happens here. At the moment we have cities in rows, so each row represents a different city, and then columns as continents. So if a given city is in Europe, we would be seeing a number here. If it's in North America, we're seeing the number in the second column. Grand total is the total of the two columns. In our case, grand total will not really be needed as it's impossible for one city to be in two continents. However, there are many scenarios where it is. Looking at the data as it is right now, I can see all cities. If I, however, want to just filter it on a specific country, let's pick something like Canada, for example. There we go. As you can see, the choice is now limited. And one more thing you probably noticed as well is that Europe disappeared. Reason for that is because none of the cities in Canada falls under Europe, so this column is completely not needed. What you can see here is the sum of temperature in a given city, and to prove how it works, let's maybe choose this one, so Calgary. I'm going to go to our source data and then under city try to find Calgary. And as you can see, the value is what you see here. That's all I planned for this episode, as it's going to get a lot more complicated from here. So if you have a chance, practice the pivot table and don't be afraid to play around moving the fields around to see what kind of combinations do you get. In the future videos we're going to explore a lot more how we can format pivot tables, add different measures and apply different functions. For the moment I'll leave it here. If you want to stay up to date and get notifications whenever I launch a new episode, please hit the subscribe button. I would like to once again thank anyone who watched this or any other of my videos. It's very encouraging to see the numbers growing. And once again, many thanks for your time. Bye bye and see you in my next video.